So, I mean, I loved Dashcam. I mean, I'm obviously, sort of always a fan of everything you do. But I remember when Host came about, it was a text from Jed, wasn't it? But it kind of the whole originated from that. So I put a screenshot up on Twitter. So how did Dashcam come to be? What was the kind of origin story there?
Well, Jed knows Annie. He produces her podcast, and he was aware of her show Band Car, which she really does. She drives around LA and makes up these amazing raps. And one day, me and Jed were getting breakfast, and he was like, "This would be a great setup for a horror movie." So we over a breakfast in Deptford basically came up with this idea of Annie doing some sort of DoorDash thing and picking up this elderly woman who ended up being dangerous in some supernatural way. And we pitched it around, and this was maybe like 2018, 2019. And nobody wanted to make it. Nobody knew who we were. This was pre-Host. And so it just went on the pile of treatments that's been accumulating. And then after Host became the success that it was, and I made this deal with Jason at Blumhouse, he was like, "Well, what do you want to make next?" And we were like, "Oh, we've got this one ready." And, it's got potential to be made in the same way as Host, shot off a treatment. And we've got a protagonist, this amazing real life character, Annie, who, thankfully has such a gift for profane improv that we were able to shoot the movie off a treatment again, just like we did with the Host girls.
I mean, when I was sort of growing up, found footage, well, I sort of saw the sort of birth of it, sort of popularized obviously by Blair Witch, and then from that came Rec and Paranormal Activity. But then there was a little bit of a lull, really. But then sort of thanks to you guys, it's being utilized again in such inventive and brilliant ways, and it feels like it's having something of a kind of rebirth at the moment. Do you think that now is as good a time as there's ever been for this subgenre, given we're all filming all of the time with so many different gadgets, that it must give you so much scope to play with?
Yeah, I think the best horror is about taking safe spaces and making them dangerous and kind of perverting them. And I think we spend so much of our time, like our happy place is staring into our phone and mindlessly scrolling, that it makes sense that people are trying to take this part of our day-to-day and infuse it with horror. It especially makes sense during the pandemic because it's so much of how we communicate with each other, and we rely on it so much to avoid needless face-to-face, and with Host it was very on the nose. With Dashcam it's slightly less tied into that recognizable aspect of the pandemic, but it felt like it feels like there are things that you can do in fan footage and a kind of authenticity you can achieve in fan footage that you can't in a more conventional mode.
Yeah, I mean, as an audience member, when watching sort of found footage, I sometimes sit there and I always think, yeah, but would they really be filming them? But that's not something that once entered my mind when I was watching Dashcam. Is that a big element in the production for you when planning and shooting the movie, to always avoid that feeling of would they be filming in this precise moment?
Oh, totally. It's would they be filming? Would they be framing? Would that, if you're being chased by an axe murderer and you are filming, probably you'd be using your flashlight and be pointing it ahead of you and not looking at the axe murderer, which isn't great for an audience at home. So it's about figuring out those believable beats that mean that you can give the audience information they need while making it feel realistic. And the realism thing was slightly less of an issue with Dashcam, because Dashcam is almost like Dashcam's like a Saturday morning cartoon. It's like everything is very amped up, and it doesn't really have the same level of grit as Host necessarily.
I loved all the comments that were coming up on the side of the screen. Did you write those? Was that quite fun, or did it get a bit tedious towards the end?
It was fun until it wasn't. Yeah, I wrote most of those, and we got a few of the crew members to basically take on different personas. I'd say, like, you're an Annie Hardy super fan, and you've just turned up and you're having a bad drug trip and you're watching all of this, and then they get the movie and they type in real time, and it was fun to trawl through the worst of the internet and try and replicate that in the comments, to dive into conspiracy theory and mean YouTube comments and Reddit, but really it was the technicality that became a nightmare. We had to create our own bespoke bit of software just to be able to handle all these comments. There's like 6,000 comments in the movie, and then Douglas Cox, our amazing producer, went through and color coded them all so the characters were consistent and had their own arcs, and found out information as Annie was going through the night. It just became a complete nightmare.
I'm interested as well. You're sort of making a kind of lead role sort of unlikable at times. I mean, obviously the anti-hero is a famous cinematic trope, but in horror movies, our investment is so often caused by our desire for the protagonist to stay alive. Yeah. So I'm just interested in what the thinking was in playing around with that notion and making it someone quite disagreeable at times, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I watch the movie, I'm rooting for her by the end. And cinema and horror cinema is like a giant empathy machine. It's really hard to not root for a character to stay alive as they're being chased by a demon. So the hope was that we'd start with a character that probably most of the audience would cross the street to avoid, and by the end of the movie you'd be rooting for her to kill the demon. And if not, I just think she's so entertaining that hopefully it's a wild ride to watch her, even if you're rooting for her demise.
I quite like the fact as well that we're kind of forced to be in the company of someone we inherently disagree with on certain issues. Because in real life, I think we can all be a little bit guilty of just shutting down anyone with a different opinion to our own. Obviously, within reason, some opinions are not deserving of being listened to. But was that a factor in saying, look, might not like her opinions, tough, but here she is, and you've got to listen to her for the next hour and a quarter?
I didn't put much thought into it, to be honest, but generally my perspective is that we need to, that nothing good comes of shutting down conversation or by just blindly ignoring people who don't share our values. I think it's much healthier to be confronted by that. And I think if somebody's opinion is really egregious to you, then let them speak and let them show what an idiot they are, rather than living this blinkered life of trying not to engage anyone who disagrees. I just think that's going to lead to a dangerous place for society.
When actors play kind of flawed, sometimes unlikable characters, I like asking the actor if they have to like them in order to embody them. That kind of like, do you have to find pity and something to relate to in order to play someone that you might not necessarily like? But I wanted to put that same question to you. When you write a screenplay, do you feel like you have to like your characters within reason? Do you feel protective of them, or do you sort of hand that responsibility over to the actor?
I kind of just assume that I'll end up caring for them, and that I'll find that level on the day. We might have even pushed it a bit too far with Dashcam, but I find Annie so funny that I was using that was kind of my true north. As if I was laughing, then it would go in the movie. And it's an interesting one, because I think Annie the person doesn't particularly like Annie the character. We wrote this script. This outline, it was like 20-page outline. We wrote this, and I'd never met Annie before apart from over Zoom. So she's this kind of like this fabricated character based around this very surface level understanding that we had of Annie from a couple of times meeting her, and also just how we wanted to maneuver the character of Annie to place everyone around her into a state of danger and chaos. She's like this kind of, I suppose the setup for the movie was, and the thing that we found exciting was like, what if the main character is the most dangerous person in the movie? What if all of the horror could be avoided if she would just make a rational choice, and have her always make the irrational choice, always make the dangerous confrontational choice.
I mean, she's brilliant in the film, and like you said, I was constantly sort of laughing. But I wanted to ask actually about Angela, because she's never acted before. Is that right? I mean, that must have been quite a leap of faith to some degree. What convinced you she'd be ready to step and have that impact? Because I guess usually when you're casting, you probably use other projects they've made and stuff to help. So yeah, what was it that made you think, right, she's going to be great? Because she was.
She's just, you meet her and she's just so evidently brilliant. She was we were looking around to try and find a woman who would look frail enough that you'd be protective, and you'd all of your kind of COVID anxiety would be projected onto her, but who would also be able to do a lot of the stunts for real, because I wanted to do it in camera. And And so a friend of mine, another director, I was getting a pint with him during the break during the first lockdown and the second lockdown, and he was like, "Oh, there's this Pilates instructor who lives above me, who just has a great look because she's never done anything." And I went round to her house with Haley, actually, from Host. Haley was playing Annie in the rehearsal, and we just rehearsed a bunch of scenes. And Haley kind of threw a bunch of curveballs at Angela, and we saw how she reacted, and she was just very present, and also just she looks like a stick insect, but she's very physically fit, being a Pilates instructor. So she did most of the stunts you see in the movie. That's actually her doing it for real.
And I obviously, you know, I spoke to you for Host, I loved that movie, and it was a film really intended in some ways to be watched at home, given the timing of its release. But Dashcam has now played at festivals, and the whoops and the cheers and the screams and the audible reactions to the content, that's what it's all about. I mean, how much did you miss that with Host, and how pleased are you that you've experienced it here with Dashcam?
Host actually plays better, I think, when you're watching it alone in your apartment under the bed sheets. Like, it's fun in a cinema, but it's not very. Host isn't very scary in a cinema. It kind of lets you off the hook by being there with other people. Whereas Dashcam was meant to be its kind of loud, boisterous cousin, and it was a celebration of being able to get back together. When we were making it, we were able to do everything in person. We were able to travel around the country. It's a road movie for that purpose, because we wanted to just like move our legs finally after months of lockdown. And it's also a celebration of getting together in the cinema and yelling at the screen and spitting your drink out and storming out if you're offended. And just it's supposed to be a big, loud, communal, drunken experience.
So my sort of final question, really, I've only got time for one more. I mean, you're filming now, is that right? Are you allowed to? What are you allowed to?
We just wrapped. I'm in the edit room actually for Boogeyman. We just wrapped a couple of weeks ago, and it's very different. It's very different from Dashcam. I knew that I was going to make Boogeyman next while we were prepping and shooting Dashcam. So Dashcam was very much like getting all of the stuff out of my system that I would not be able to do in a bigger budgeted studio movie. And yeah, so we're in the edit on that, and it's I think, touch wood, I watched the first assembly last week, and the first assemblies are always excruciatingly painful, and it was good. I think it's going to be really good. Like, we've got an incredible cast and an incredible team, and I don't think I fucked it up. So hopefully it'll turn out. As good as it feels.
Yeah. So just very, very quickly, I just wondered if you've had you had any meetings with Stephen King? And I mean, he's famously not always too keen sometimes on his adaptations. How nervous or excited are you to eventually present the film to him?
I'm terrified. I kind of don't. I try not to think about it as I think about it as a Stephen King adaptation in its heart. But I think if I was to go to work every day thinking I'm making a Stephen King movie, I would I'd go AWOL. I'd run away and get another job out of fear. So I'm taking it in my stride, and I think I feel like we've honored the source material whilst kind of creating our own mythology, and he's been lovely throughout the whole process. He read the script and gave us great feedback and really loved the script. And so if I haven't fucked it up, hopefully he'll like the movie as well.
Brilliant. Well, I can't wait to see it, Rob. I love watching your career trajectory. Just
Thanks,
every
man.
project. So, and hopefully by the time that comes, right, we might be able to do one of these interviews in person. Who knows?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, best of luck with the rest of the making of it and the release of Dashcam, and we'll catch up soon, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Cheers. Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey!